Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller, from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate. Joe Mueller.
What's this new thing you're talking about, Hubstaff?
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing. I've been through a couple virtual assistants before, and I'm still not successful at having a good one yet. I think I have a good one, but with Hubstaff, what I'm able to do is that I'm able to see what user is doing, and I have multiple projects going on. I might have, somebody doing property management work. I have somebody doing Buildium work, somebody uploading all my transactions from this year into Buildium. So I have my company name, and then I have my list of projects underneath.
How much does this cost? It's hubstaff.com?
Yeah, it's $9 a month
per user. Okay, so If you had 5 virtual assistants, it's like $45 a month, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool.
And this is the way I calculate it. If someone leaves to go to the bathroom, read a magazine, read the newspaper,
go on Facebook,
and then come back, it's going to calculate their activity, how active they were. How did they come up with this number? I don't know, but it's pretty impressive. The one person that I'm tracking right now, they're coming up like at 70 or 80% active,
right?
And which is fine with me, but I know everything that they're doing because it's taking screenshots, 2 or 3 of them every 10 minutes.
The virtual assistant has to have the software on their computer as well, but it's like a time clock, right, where they punch in and out with it?
Correct.
So they have. And so you pretty much tell them, like, hey, you got to download this. This is my time clock.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And the awesome thing about it is it tracks their hours. You can have a max set of hours per week.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And it also has, this is another thing I really like about it, is that, the problem that I was running into with the virtual assistant is, they're the ones that I'm using are 14 hours ahead of us.
Right.
So it would be like Friday, Thursday night, I'm out with the family or doing whatever, and they're bugging me, telling me they want to pay. And I'm like, all right, I have my computer, I'm at Home Depot or doing whatever, so I can't do it, and they're bugging me. Then I look bad because I'm not paying them, because the time difference.
Sure.
And so it can have like an automatic payroll where, whatever hours they worked, they get paid.
That's awesome.
And
I like it.
And with the Philippines, their methods of payments, it's really goofy because you can pay through PayPal. If they're not established with them, it could take up to a month to get for the payment to get to them. If you pay it through other banks, there's high fees associated with it, and it does take a couple days, or else you can like expedite the process, and it might cost you $5 or $6 to do this, but the method of payment, they have multiple ways, and it's very cheap and convenient. So
I love it.
I never made a payment. Yeah, I never made a payment through it yet, but I'm excited just because it's one less thing I have to think about. And getting back to some of its user functions is that you can have multiple projects going on. Like I have my Buildium stuff, so I have one virtual assistant for that.
Right.
They log in. So it tracks all my expenses, because before I had like a website going on. I had somebody doing property tax research stuff going on. So I'm just dishing out all this money. First of all, not knowing if they're really utilizing the time. And of all, I know what they're doing.
Sure.
So I'm dishing out all this money, not knowing how much I'm spending on my tax research, how much I'm spending on my website. So this has all the projects separated
out.
Spending on.
Right. So you'll be able to say, okay, the VA spent 27 hours in the last whatever. Let's say your website took 6 months to build. They spent 20. That's an inaccurate amount, but they spent 500 hours on it. You're like, oh, okay, so this is what it cost me to get it done.
Yeah. It's awesome, because before I have no clue what I'm spending, because I'm paying this guy this guy that through PayPal, through another site. And, you just see the bills all the time, but you never add them up.
Right.
So I love it. And so I went through one virtual assistant that I didn't know. I think she was lying to me with her time. The second one, I went through the all interview process. I, explained to her how the pay works. I always give them $1 or $2 less than what they're asking for. And then I say every quarter when we meet our goals,
Right.
I'm paying you, I add in a bonus. I go, you get all that back pay that you wanted.
Oh, there you go.
And so, and it will exceed a little bit than what they wanted. So that's like kind of their incentive
Sure.
to stick around. Yeah. So this one, I got her all set up, spent all this time on her. I go, all right, this is my method of, logging in the hours and everything. And then she never responded back. So I guess she got scared and didn't want me tracking her time.
Oh.
So that was it. So it scared her away. So it was a good thing, though.
Yeah, that makes it easy. They move on to the next one. She wouldn't have worked anyway.
Yeah.
Worked out anyway, I should have said.
Yeah. So now, the one that I have now, it's awesome. I just check up, see what she's doing, seeing all the screenshots, and I love it.
That's awesome that it takes screenshots and just shows you what they're up to. Because hypothetically, like I said, whether it's somebody in the Philippines or somebody out here, they could be sitting on Facebook and clicking away. And if you're going to get 27 Facebook screenshots a day, you have a problem. So
yeah,
you can keep
and
on
just
top
like
of
I said, I'm getting tired of all these little expenses that I have, like Google Drive, Evernote, all this stuff.
Right.
Like, it all adds up to be a lot, and this just adds on to it. But think about it. If someone rips you off an hour or two or whatever, it's, they can't now.
Right.
It's paid for.
Yeah.
So.
Sure, I know the feeling. I get nickeled and dimed every month. I go through that credit card, and I'm like, man, why do I even have this anymore? And I'm constantly canceling stuff. Subscriptions, or you sign up for one webinar, it costs you like $1 or whatever it is. The next thing you know, they're $29.99 a month going on your card. I'm like, what the heck? So then no one answers the phone, and you got to fight with them and dispute it. It's a mess, but I get it. Hey, I want to change gears with you real quick on another topic that's interesting. The networking group we're running out in Schaumburg, I have had the hardest time. I shouldn't say that. With the hard money lending side of the business, I thought to myself, all right, what's the best way to have an engaged networking group and have the right resources available? Like, you got to have a lender there, like a mortgage broker, which we have Zach Karp from Success Mortgage Partners is my guy. He's sponsored the meeting for the last year every month.
Oh, wow.
Spot on. We had a contractor there for the first year. They're no longer going to be a part of it for year 2 because they're actually overwhelmed. The contractor's actually in the middle of, well, not necessarily from the group, though they did do a couple rehabs with some of the investors, but they changed gears and they hired some new people to run some other projects. Their business is growing, so that's a great thing. Maybe the investor meetup helped a little bit, I don't know. So we had them there. We've got like an alternative financing guy, which is Bill Jennings from Pathway Financial. And this isn't supposed to be a sponsorship plug, but I just want to explain why I'm kind of frustrated with this one aspect. And again, Bill Jennings, Pathway Financial, they're based out of Palatine, Illinois. They offer lines of credit for investing. Great concept. He's gotten business out of it. Investors are utilizing the resources he can provide. And then we've got an attorney there, which is Chris Emerald, who I actually interviewed, I think, on episode number 24. Asset protection, business setup, real estate closings, land trust, the whole deal. He can do stuff like that. So I tried to create this full circle package.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah,
I like it.
And it worked, except for one spoke in the wheel. And I'm not going to call out names on anything, but the hard money guys, I'm now going on to my fourth hard money guy. Like, no one has been consistent, and I just can't wrap my head around it because I know the first group we had, they stuck around for 4 or 5 months. They sponsored the group. They got like 6 or 7 loans out of it. And I only know that because the people in the group are coming up to me going, hey, just so you know, I used XYZ hard money to go get funding for this deal, and it worked out really well. I'm like, awesome, that's great. That's the whole point. They're paying, a small fee per month to be part of the group. I say the hard money lender is paying a small fee. The attendees get, food and the room gets paid for. They don't have to pay a door charge. That was kind of the thought process. And then they're like, oh man, we're overwhelmed. We're getting too busy. I'm like, what does that mean? You're not going to come to the meetup anymore? They're like, yeah, sorry. Like, okay. Now, granted, this was back in the spring, so, maybe one would assume that they actually were overwhelmed because that's like when the real estate market starts to heat up around here. So then I get another company. They stick around for one meeting. Again, there's like 60 people show up to this meeting. They're getting bombarded. After the meeting, there's a line of like 15 investors at this guy's table. Like, can I get your card? Can I get your folder? Whatever. They bail on me. And I don't even want to get into that one because that was like a personal issue. They got upset about something, and I was like, what? It's like, dude, business is business, whatever. You guys figured out. It was an internal thing on their side where they sent 2 people out from their company, and the 2 people are both loan officers, and they like fought over who was supposed to be there. It was ridiculous. So then I get a third company. They showed up for a meeting, which I didn't charge them for, which again, this is, it's $200 to sponsor the meeting per sponsor because the meeting costs, you're renting out the rooms like 12. It is. Yeah. It's $1,200 a month. And again, I'm not trying to air all the dirty laundry on the podcast because I am going to broadcast this. But to me, like Zach Karp from Success Mortgage Partners, I couldn't tell you how many loans he's done, but I guarantee you it's like 10 to 15 loans as a result of the meetup. It's not necessarily all investors, but he's met people that have referred him more business. I know I've personally referred him like 4 or 5 loans in the last couple of months. I mean, there's no way the dude ain't raking it in as a result of the sponsorship of the meetup. So then I get, like I said, I give this new company a freebie meeting. I go, just show up in, I think it was October. I was like, show up in October, check it out. I'll let you set up a table, bring some of your swag, bring your folders, bring your flyers, whatever. I'll let you get up in front of the room. Everybody gets like a 1-minute deal to talk. And again, they get 10 people at their table after the meeting asking questions, business cards, folders, like all the right stuff. And then I get an email today. Actually, my admin, Tracy, just forwarded it to me while we were talking on before we started recording, saying that they're going to have to reevaluate. Well, they didn't show up in November because of a medical problem with the guy who's supposed to be there. And then I notified him that our next meetup is December 21st. And I said, hey, by the way, you didn't pay for November, and now you owe me for December, so now we're talking $400. And he sends an email back saying, we're going to have to reevaluate whether or not we want to continue to sponsor the group. I'm like, what is going on? So now I'm going to give myself a shameless plug because I found a new sponsor that I'm going to be a part of because Tenants is already sponsoring. But I actually found a lending partner that I can work with. It's essentially me having the ability to help underwrite some of these loans that are all non-owner occupied. And it's similar to hard money, but the rates are like 8 to 12% with a couple of points. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, there's some hard money lenders I've worked with that are charging 15 to 18%. I mean, there's insane percentages. Huh? So they're looking at like 8 to 12. I already vetted them out myself. I processed a loan in my own name to see what the rate would be, to see what the costs would be, to see how the process worked. And I'll be honest, it was so good and seamless that I thought this is a great way to have, a lending opportunity for our investors and a way for me to stay involved and keep the sponsorship going in the group and actually, be a part of that loan side. So, Tenants helps you find properties, or you buy a wholesale deal, or maybe you buy a turnkey property from you and me because, we've got the turnkey business going in the south suburbs. And now I have the lending component that I can actually, and I can actually have it a part of the day-to-day business and say, and if you need a loan, I might be able to help. So I just want to, for all the listeners out there, talk to me one-on-one or shoot me an email if you have any more questions about that. I'm going to start promoting it a little bit more. I'm probably going to start promoting it on the podcast a little bit. But just the frustration, and not to mention that, again, gave him a freebie meeting and, then they basically bail out after not showing up for the last one. I thought, man, how ridiculous. And, no offense.
I couldn't imagine what better of an environment to push their product out.
That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. Like, unless they've got some type of metric going on in the background where they were able to analyze the group and say like, oh, we're only going to get one loan every 3 months out of this, which again, that might be the case, but if they're going to make $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 in interest over a 6 or 12 month period, and it cost them a couple $100 up front to do that by making a few connections, I mean, I think that would be the point. But yeah, no, it's the strangest thing ever. But anyway, so today we're on the podcast. I got Eddie Mccracken back. You were one of my first guests back when I got started. Now we're on. This is episode number 27, actually. Do you remember which one you were? I can pull it up, but
I think it was like the $500 properties or the off market stuff. I think we were talking about a lot of.
Yeah, number 6.
How I get stuff. Yeah, how I get
it
the
was
properties.
Eddie Mccracken on low end rentals, rehabbing, and tax deed investing was the title. That was episode number 6. Now we've got Eddie back on the podcast today because he actually was. He's one of the subscribers, and he listened to episode number 18, which is to Section 8 or to not Section 8. That is the question, where I talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly of Section 8. And he contacted me and he said, hey, I got some extra stuff that I can add into that I think the listeners would benefit from. So we're going to do to Section 8 or to not Section 8 Part 2 with Eddie Mccracken. So why don't you tell me what you were thinking as far as talking to the listeners about regarding Section 8?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, you did an awesome job of, like, giving, like, a real-world experience on how the Section 8 program works, because there's a lot of, like, investors out there that think, like, or new investors, they get all excited, like, yeah, I'm going to get a rental property, get a Section 8 tenant in there, and it pays for itself. Like, yeah, okay, good luck with that. And I can tell sometimes when people are, like, new investors call me about asking, you know, some of the properties that I have, and like, oh, you mainly do Section 8, right? I'm like, nope, don't do it. Well, don't do it that much.
Right.
So, but you probably just didn't have enough time to go over everything very thoroughly. But I just, you know, I took some notes from your podcast of some things that I wanted to go over. But
sure, let's do it.
Yeah, my experience comes with directly dealing with Section 8 for about 12 to ever since I started investing, maybe a little bit over 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. So if anybody thinks I'm wrong about something, we can arm wrestle over it if you want. But if
and
not,
they're going to lose. If they've ever met you, they'll know they're going to lose.
But also, if you want to just prove me wrong, that's cool too. I love being wrong. I'm wrong all the time. So it's kind of funny though, like how my clientele shifted from not so much Section 8 to a lot of Section 8 to barely any Section 8. It went from like 20% in the beginning to 50% in like the middle of all my stuff, and now I'm probably back down to like 10 or 20%. And it's not that I stay away from them. I just find more qualified cash-paying tenants. And I find it kind of harder to deal with Section 8 issues just because they have like a barrier of protection in addition to what's already out there. And barrier, I mean like the Section 8 program. So,
right.
You know, so you have to go through them, and Section 8 will withhold payments if something's not done right, which I never really happened, but it just adds on to the top of the mix. But I got, you know, I'll start from the beginning of why I kind of like stopped going away from them was that, you know, I had a tenant that she was awesome. Well, she seemed awesome. It was the honeymoon stage.
Right.
She lived at her apartment, you know, for 8 years. I did with almost all Section 8s, I do home visits, because I know their credit's not worthless, usually, more times than not. So I go to their house because I want to see how they live. And this lady, her house was clean, her carpet was dirty, but she lived there for 8 years. So it's like awesome. I love it.
Right.
And it was probably used when she moved in. So I got her all set up at my place. I had a 3-bedroom house. She had a 2-bedroom voucher, which I'll go into details with that late in a couple minutes. But, you know, there's a chain of command you have to go through Section 8, and she stopped paying rent, and I did an eviction on her, and the whole time I thought I was going to be getting her kicked off the program. And she trashed my house, and then, you know, I have pretty much all the important people's contacts at Section 8. And she filed bankruptcy, listed me as a creditor, and then someone who's in charge of kicking people off at Section 8, like their hearings section, whatever they call them, she's like, oh, she filed bankruptcy. She doesn't owe you money anymore. I'm like, what? This is crazy. So after that, it was like, you know, I got burned pretty bad. So not that I stay away from them, but I'm very careful on how I do things because of that. So it was a good learning experience. But, yeah, so, and then before that, the reason why I started going to Section 8 so much was because I was starting to go to these landlord meetings that they had, and the lady that was running it, she was pretty awesome. She'd talk about, like, how great of a program it was, and if these people aren't paying rent, then we want them off the program because there's thousands of people waiting to get on Section 8, and we only want the good people.
Was this like a Section 8 held or hosted meeting? Or like,
yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I've heard about those as well, where they explain the program to investors or landlords, the general public, so they have a better understanding of the tenant who's on Section 8, therefore kind of promoting Section 8 in general. So that's cool. Very educational, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it was. And she sounded awesome. And, you know, and I got all excited. So then I signed up for, like, gosection8.com whenever I got a rental.
Sure.
But I kind of, like, pursued those people. And so this lady that held the meeting, you mentioned on the previous podcast about Section 8 is, like, you have good experience with calling the caseworker. I will never pick up the phone and try and call them. Everything is done through email because that way it's documented. And there's like phone trees of like who runs what department and everything, and then their boss. So there's phone trees out there. I think it's on the Section 8 website. And if you have a current tenant, there's like a little login portal where there's like downloads where you can download certain things.
Right.
So the way I do stuff is that I'll email the caseworker or case manager, because in my past I have never gotten through a caseworker. So I'll email them. And before I knew about this phone tree about whose job is what, I would wait a week or two, not hear back, email them again, not hear back.
Right.
I get really frustrated with everything. So then after I found this phone tree, you know, I'll email them once, wait a day or two, email them again, wait a day or two. And then my third time I email them, I attach this, you know, their supervisor, and then they usually get back right away.
Sure.
So that I had a lot of good luck with that, and that's what I kind of do. So that's what I've been doing, and they get back to me right away. And,
well, yeah, but you're adding in the supervisor at Section 8. That's probably part of the reason why, right?
Yeah, they jumped to my email.
Yeah, because I'll be honest. I mean, like, well, we're dealing with two different counties in Chicago as well. Like, my Section 8 stuff is mainly out in the Kane County area. You're in Cook, you know, Southern Cook. Not that, I mean, you'd think it'd be a similar experience. And what I seem to experience is, same as you, if I send an email, it has a tendency to go unanswered potentially, depending on what the email's about. And then I'll get a phone call to discuss what needs to be documented via. So I'll give you an example. I got a phone call. I just rented another Section 8 tenant out in December of 2016. That's where we're at. Today's December 15th. So I rented out, I think, the unit like December 3rd or 4th. And I had been emailing the caseworker looking for kind of a status on when the inspection was scheduled, if she needed any more paperwork, you know, because, you know, there's kind of a process, right? Just like I talked about in the podcast on number 18.
Yeah.
And I was not getting any response via email, even though the tenant themselves was kind of up my butt about it, like, hey, I want to move in. And I'm like, hold on, I need something verifying that we're good to go on this, because it is kind of this weird process where it's not like all of a sudden they send you this magical email or a letter in the mail that says, oh, Section 8 approved, blah, blah, blah. It's all either phone call or email. And I did, after sending a few emails, I got a phone call back from the caseworker to verify the fact that everything was good to go. But she basically wanted to talk about it on the phone before it was, you know, documented via email. So I think it depends on the county. But yeah, I mean, I hate to bash the government program that helps pay the rents and the mortgages on the properties we both are investing in. But yeah, it can be challenging to kind of get to pin them down and get what you need sometimes.
Yeah, and it's not nothing. Sometimes it's not against the caseworker that's handling your stuff. They probably have a huge caseload of stuff, and they're probably really lazy at what some people think. But I'm sure there's some really lazy ones. But
sure.
Whatever. So it's part of the game. So that's how I've, you know, gotten the best responses back. And I had it where I had upper management like call the tenant and be like, hey, you're going to get kicked off, blah, blah, blah. You better pay this man. And that helped out sometimes too. And then there was this one time I was at this one meeting, and I saw this lady that was pretty high up there, and I was bragging to her about this caseworker, or not the caseworker, but the caseworker's boss that always helped me out. And I'm like, who's her boss? Can I get her email to tell her how good of a job she's doing? Now it's like I have a big problem. Now I got the head honcho's email to go to, and I emailed her before saying how good of a job this lady did.
There you go.
So
kill him with kindness. I like it.
So, and then I did have to reach out to her one time, so I just forwarded her the email of her responding to me of me complimenting their program like a year ago. So I'm not just one of those people who complain about stuff all the time.
Sure.
So I think that's out too.
Well, you've definitely learned how to navigate your way through the Section 8 phone tree and email system, I guess. That's awesome.
Yeah. It comes in handy when you're having issues. But yeah, so the move-in process that you're talking about, that can be kind of difficult because, the tenant comes in, looks at your house.
Right.
And if they like it and they pass your screening, well, okay, let me backtrack first right away before you let anybody over at your house.
Right.
When they call you and like, for example, if I have a nice 3-bedroom house, 2-bathroom, I'm asking $1,300 for it. A person with the voucher, I call it the golden ticket, but the person with the voucher, they'll say, yeah, I'm interested in your place. And then you say, oh, the first thing I ask, they go, how many bedroom voucher do you have? You go, I have a 2-bedroom voucher. Okay, well, I'm asking $1,300 for the property. I'm very familiar how Section 8 works. The most they're going to offer me because your 2-bedroom voucher is $975. No, but my voucher says $1,350.
Right.
No. They give you the most amount for a 2-bedroom house, which is minus the utilities. It's some type of matrix that it looks Chinese to me. But all I know is at the end of the day, without me paying utilities, I'm going to get like $925 to $950.
Right.
And then they'll argue with you. And then you say, all right, and this is the other thing that you taught me in your podcast. And I don't know where I came up with this idea, but for some reason, I thought they passed the law that you cannot discriminate against income. Were they talking about that before or no? Am I just making that up?
No, I've brought that up in more than one podcast. I mean, you can discriminate based on income, and Section 8 is one of those discriminatory factors. If you do not want to, that's why they always call and ask you, do you accept Section 8? Because you're allowed to discriminate against it.
Yeah, I never knew that. So, sure. But basically what I tell them is that I go, all right, because this is, I thought I can get in trouble for denying somebody a property. This is what I tell them. I go, all right, well, your voucher, I know for a fact that the most it'll pay is $925.
Right.
So we can fill stuff if you pass my screening process, okay, and I decide to rent to you. By the time Section 8 gets out here and everything, somebody might rent the house already, and you will lose out on the house. Or we can wait, let them inspect it, let them pass it, let them go through their numbers in their Chinese matrix, and then tell me they're only going to give me $925, and I'm not going to accept it. And then we both wasted a month of each other's time.
Sure.
So it's up to you. And, usually they say, no, it's okay. And I've also had it, though, where I had a tenant that was with me for 2 or 3 years that just qualified for Section 8, and she's a real nice girl. She's like a personal friend of mine, and she told me that her caseworker told her that a voucher amount would be paid up to, basically what I just went over with you. It's like their 2-bedroom voucher goes up to $1,300, so they can go up to a house that the rent's $1,300, which is completely false. So,
but you brought up the utility aspect, and that's where that, you're calling it the Chinese matrix, but that is, I think if you're paying heat, water, gas, and I know those in Chicago we associate heat with gas because typically it's forced air, gas heat, but that could be boiler, radiator, that could be electric heat, plug-in, however it's heated. If you pay all that stuff, garbage, because I just went through it. Like I said, I just went through it this month again for the 5th time in the last year, we'll probably say. I think that's where that reduction or that change might come in. So if you're paying all the utilities, and all the amenities even, like garbage and, all that stuff, scavenger, whatever you want to do, then yeah, you might get that $1,300 for a 2-bedroom.
Yeah, and I highly, I don't recommend it at all.
Oh, no.
Because
no, because then the heat's going to be cranked up at 90 degrees every day, and they're going to be,
Well, it still will, regardless if you're paying it or not, though. That's the thing. That's the other thing. So
true.
they like
true.
it hot in there.
That's true.
So, I'd have everybody over doing laundry at my house if I wasn't paying the water bill.
Right.
People, I make a business out of it.
I think that's been done before. I've heard some horror stories from some investors where they've literally their tenants have leased out the washer and dryer in their basements or whatever, and had whoever they want come over and do laundry, and they'll charge them $1 a load or whatever because they're not paying for it. Right.
But so I'm going to talk about utilities in a second because that's a whole nother can of worms that I want to get into. But we'll just keep going with the moving process. So you find somebody, you like them, you fill out their paperwork. Then a lot of times what they want to do is take that paperwork and drive it downtown, drop it off so they get it in their hand.
Right.
But along with that paperwork is your social security number, your federal tax ID number, and all that other personal information where you live. So probably not a good idea.
Okay.
And I would just mail it because what's 3 more days, I guess? No big deal.
Right.
So there's that issue. So just take that down, and then you kind of wait for the inspection process. And before, probably about 5 to 6, 7 years ago, it's when like the Section 8 caseworkers would come out and inspect your property. It was so inefficient, and they get out there in a month after you sent that paperwork in, and they get back to you in a couple of weeks. It was a nightmare. Then they hired an outside agency that does everything, and they're efficient. They're not a typical government-ran agency because they come out there with their iPads taking pictures of stuff and uploading stuff, and they're pretty efficient. So, you hand in your paperwork, they process it, they call you for the inspection, and they say, all right, well, somebody will be out for inspection or call you about setting up the inspection in a couple of days. A couple of days goes by. They call you. They're like, all right, we could be out here in 3 days. Like, all right, perfect. So I always anticipate on failing the first inspection. And it's no different than having like a city village inspection or anything. They're just checking for basic stuff like, does your windows lock? Well, they should lock. So yes, your windows lock. Do you have plumbing leaks? No, I don't. I just had my house certified by a plumber. So just common sense stuff they look for.
Right.
The other thing you have to be careful of is the peeling paint.
Right.
Sometimes I had a house in December fail inspection because of peeling paint. And it's like, I'm meaning on the outside. So it's like, how do I go outside and paint? And
right.
So you just got to be careful of the peeling paint stuff.
Sure.
So after the first inspection, this is the kicker. What I typically do, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I'm cool with them moving in, even if I fail, because I know the dollar amount I'm going to get from Section 8 because of my experience, and I'm okay with that. So then rather than starting the lease, sometimes they'll take a week or two to get back to me to tell me the dollar amount. Therefore, I lose out on another week or two of rent and sitting on an empty house. And I get the shakes with an empty house. So I'll just have them move in. They'll call me, tell me the dollar amount. People claim they can negotiate. I don't like to negotiate because I think it's pointless because I think they're looking at the Chinese matrix that it's what it is. And you can have a house in horrible condition or a house in perfect condition, and there's no difference between the price you're going to get.
Right.
So it's just you just have to be careful for what type of person that would accept a horrible house. Probably the person you're looking for then if you put together like a bad product. So
sure,
it might be perfect. Yeah.
No, I do want to interject and touch on that real quick because you brought up a really good point regarding the type of tenant that you end up securing based on the condition of the property. I think that there's a general, misbelief out there that Section 8 is problematic housing. And I know, you mentioned earlier in the podcast, like I don't do it as much. So I just want to clarify that part of it. The reason why that it becomes that Section 8 may not be as desirable is not necessarily because the tenant or the way that they keep the house, because again, that can all be taken care of in the screening process and you can eliminate those bad seeds. But it's more the fact of the program itself can be challenging to deal with when you're, especially as an investor with only a hand of maybe 1 or 2 properties, and then the tenant themselves may start generating a higher income, and then Section 8 cuts back on the amount they're going to be offering monthly. So that's where that kind of challenge comes from, which that's a whole nother topic. But back to the condition of the property, as a management company, my firm, we manage regular tenants, rentals, as well as Section 8, ones that I own, as well as clients. So kind of have a broad mix, and I'd like to say, something to the effect of you get what you pay for. So, I've got a client right now who moved out of a property and didn't really take care of it even when they lived there, and then came to me and said, and it's not in the nicest part of town either, and they came to me and said, hey, can you manage this property? I'm like, yeah, sure, great. I check it out. I kind of note some challenges, some repairs that are needed. Long story short, we ended up with a tenant that is on Section 8 and, pretty much fits the mold for that condition of that property. Now, on the opposite end, which, she is consistently problematic with obtaining rental payment from her. Section 8 pays, but, her portion is significant enough where every month, we'll call it, I'm chasing down money, a couple $100 here and there. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, on a nice house, you can obtain a higher quality tenant that has a long-term rental history with good landlord, feedback after when you're doing your screening, and they do take care of the property, and Section 8 comes in and, may pay whatever their portion is, but the tenant fully understands it. So I think the important thing that you brought up is, like you just mentioned, I mean, if you're going to not necessarily keep that property up, or you don't seem to care about it as much, you're probably going to end up with a tenant that probably doesn't care as much either, and that comes down to paying rent. But if you keep up on the property, now again, it can go either way, right? I mean, that's the whole game of landlord.
Oh, sure.
But
yeah, for sure.
I've found in my experience that if you offer a nicer product, you end up with a nicer customer, we'll call it, which is going to be your tenant, whether it be Section 8 or a regular retail tenant anyway. But anyway, sorry, I just wanted to interject on that side. Go ahead. Go on.
No, great point. So they're not going to give you any more money, so I have them move in, and then everything's negotiated after that. The other point I wanted to bring up now is that when you're talking about utilities, it's common practice, I think it's common, that some of the landlords that will accept Section 8, what they'll do is they'll add on like water or something, like they're paying water, and the tenant's paying it themselves. So there's some type of utility check that they get or something, or credit. I don't know how it works with them, but sometimes they'll try and boost up the rent. Instead of getting that $925 for that 2-bedroom house, now they're going to get $1015.
Okay.
And the tenant's supposed to be paying, or the landlord's supposed to be paying the water, but the tenant is. I'm pretty sure that's a federal crime. That's like something. Sure. I don't know. You're lying about what you're getting or providing, and
sure. No, you're getting a federal benefit. So I mean, if you're fraudulently, applying or documenting something, then yeah, you're in trouble. You can be.
Yeah. So, but now here's the thing. Once you cross that line, and this is what I'm talking about with like the barrier of protections. I'm not going to say what I've done or what I did in the past or whatever, but you have this. You claim that you're paying the water bill. You're having the tenant pay the water bill, and now they're starting being late all the time, and it's like it's to a point where you can't handle it anymore. So now you reach out to the caseworker. The caseworker calls them, and then they're saying stuff like, "Yeah, I can't afford his rent. I'm paying this water bill that he's supposed to be paying."
Right.
And they're like, "What?"
Sure.
So, once you cross that line in certain areas, you're kind of screwed. Because,
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's, I don't mess with any of that anymore, or ever did it, or just because I hear stories, because you say you run your business one way, so you have to run it that way.
Right.
And then once they cross into that area where they start being late or just whatever, because, this is the other thing, that, when a tenant calls me for my $1,300 3-bedroom house that they have a 2-bedroom voucher for, and, that the max is going to pay is $925, they'll say they'll make up the difference.
Right.
That is illegal. You cannot have them make up the difference. And that's my other point. So now they're only obligated to $925 a month.
Right.
And whatever they're paying. Like maybe they're paying, Section 8's paying $900, they're paying $25 a month. then baby daddy's paying the extra amount for the first couple months of the honeymoon stage.
Okay.
Then
sure.
takes off or whatever, and because whatever reasons, now she can't pay the $1,325. You can't evict her for that difference. So you guys have a contract for $925.
Right. So to elaborate on what you said, and that was some of the stuff I brought up in episode number 18, was how you don't really know what you're going to end up getting. I mean, one of the challenges with Section 8 is after you've been evaluated by the caseworker, you may set the rent at $1,300, but the caseworker may come back and say, okay, you're going to get $925, or the tenant can only be paying, we'll call it $925 a month. Let's say that's because they are responsible for paying water or heat or scavenger, whatever it is. And then, you cannot tack on another couple hundred and say, well, you got to make up the difference. Now, the converse argument to that is there are situations where Section 8 will pay more than the $925. The problem is they don't necessarily, I said that backwards. If you wanted $1,300, then once they tell you that they're only going to get $925, no investor should be thinking that they're going to get any more than $925 if that's what Section 8 documents on their paperwork, because that's what the tenant obligation is at that point. Even if you make a side deal with the tenant, which, like you stated, is illegal, for the additional $375, you can't hold them to that amount. It's technically fraud, and so you're not going to get your $1,300 at the end of the day. So you got to be real careful and diligent when you're working with Section 8 to make sure that everyone understands who's paying what and how much money you should be getting in your checking account every month. And not to continue on, but this most recent situation I dealt with, this is a good example of how sometimes it can work kind of the other way. I had a Section 8 tenant come to me exactly like you stated, with a voucher for up to a 4-bedroom for $1,700 a month. I had a place rented for I had a place advertised at $1,350, which was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath with a garage. And, the tenant was, so we started that process. She's basically told me that she gets full benefit. She never has, she's unemployed. She has been for a long time. However that works on their side, don't know. But she basically has Section 8 paying her entire rent. And, kind of get you giddy inside when you have a place for rent for $1,350 and they come to the table saying that they get a $1,700 voucher, right? Because I'm like, oh boy, I'm going to get $1,700 instead of $1,350. Yeah, well, that's not.
You talked about that in your last podcast, and I've made a note to talk about that too. So
well, let me wrap up this one. But the end of the story with this one was, Section 8 did their diligence, and before we signed off on anything, I filled out the initial paperwork, which dictates who's paying what utilities, which was the tenant paying all the utilities. And Section 8 contacted me via phone again, not via email, but via phone, and said, well, your rent is $1,350. This isn't going to work unless you'll reduce your rent to $1,336. This is real life stuff. Now, clearly, I didn't bat an eye at that. I said $1,336, so we just got to drop the rental lease amount to $14. She goes, yeah. And I said, oh, okay, great, no problem. I'll do that all day long. But again, she comes to the table, the tenant comes to the table saying $1,700 voucher, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, I'm still happy because what I was really looking for was $1,350. I got $1,336 on a 1-year lease that's basically guaranteed for the next 12 months unless the tenant flakes out or vacates or whatever. But so let's get into what you were saying that you took notes on from the last podcast about it, because that was kind of what I was talking about.
Just the fact that you thought that you were going to be getting above market rent for that property, I think you said. And
well, that's the way it appears, because it's confusing, exactly. Because you don't know, exactly. Just like you said, the foreign
matrix.
Yeah, the foreign language matrix. I'm trying to give you the PC term. That's okay.
I don't understand that. So.
But yeah, you don't know exactly what you're going to get until you're somewhat committing to spend time with that tenant. You're screening them already, because you want to screen them before you get through the Section 8 paperwork, because you might not want them anyway. So you're already spending money on that side of it, screening. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
So basically, I don't know where we were at. We're probably just talking about the rent amounts.
Yeah.
Oh, about doing the federal illegal stuff. So you want to make sure you play by your rules, because once they break their rules, you can't come after them or say you're not doing this right or doing that right. So it's very important that you play by the rules with this stuff, because there are ways to getting burned.
Oh yeah.
So also, I just found this out. Section 8 doesn't pay more for garages.
Okay.
So if you have a property, you could say, yeah, I'm like, I just rented out a 3-bedroom slab to a 2-bedroom voucher that I'm getting like $925. And if you put somebody looking for a 3-bedroom with a basement, when they have a 3-bedroom voucher in there, they're on a timeline in a smaller house like that, the one that I rented out. So I said, hey, I'll accept a 2-bedroom voucher for this 3-bedroom house, but I'm keeping the garage.
Oh, okay.
They were cool with that.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So, yeah, and I asked the caseworker specifically, I'm like, when she gave me the dollar amount, I go, do you have the garage included in there? And then she's like, we don't pay more for garages. I'm like, perfect. So then I'm not getting money for extra money for the garage. And then I asked her because I was kind of trying to negotiate with her for the dollar amounts. And I don't recommend it. It was just I had nothing to do, so I figured I'd just talk to her and try and improve my negotiation skills. And then I'm like, all right, well, did she tell you that? Cause I told the inspector that the appliances were not included, and because they were all there, they were all mine. And then I go to the caseworker when we were negotiating. I go, do you have the appliances on there? And not that I was looking to add them in, because I'm not. And she goes, no, I don't have the appliances on there. I'm like, all right, well, how much extra is it if they add on, if I have the stove there, or if I have the refrigerator there? And she's like, and I think I knew the answer, but she's like, maybe like $5 or $6. And I'm like, I'm giggling on the inside. I'm like, hell no, because it's like, if you say that they get the washer, the dryer, the fridge, stove, you're obligated to repair those.
Yeah, maintain it, right?
And, yeah, so I just increased my rental amount by $5, but my liabilities just doubled or tripled on that property.
Absolutely,
So,
great point. But
So, yeah.
now, what do you think about the fact that if a tenant comes into that property and wants to actually lease it through Section 8, and then you basically say, yeah, by the way, that stove, that fridge, and that washer dryer are not staying. You have to supply your own.
Yeah, that's a little gray area, but this is how you can work that angle, is that, depending on the tenant, and like if you fall in love with them and everything, and to me, everything's negotiable, because what I tell them, especially Section 8 tenants, I tell them, I rent appliances out now. I might throw in a stove or something, or fridge, but I try and rent them out because the liability on them is outrageous. And if you put it at a fair price where it's cheaper than renting it at, like, what are those rental stores called? Like,
Rent-A-Center.
Rent-A-Center?
Yep.
Yeah. So they charge like $60 for a washer and dryer, and then you have to pay that for like 4 years or something. And I just buy the cheapest stuff from Home Depot. That's my place, Home Depot.
Sure.
And get like a 5-year warranty for an extra $100, and it'll pay itself off in like 3 years. And I charge them like $30-40 for it. And they love it. And then they ask, well, when is this paid for? I go, never. I'm responsible for it.
Right.
So, but so everything's negotiable. And when if you fall in love with them, be like, all right, hey, what's it going to take for me to get you to sign? Stuff like that. So then if like this 3-bedroom house I was talking about that I just rented out to the 2-bedroom voucher, I did supply that stuff, but I said, hey, look I go, this stuff is yours. I go, if something goes down, it's on you. I go, I'm not responsible. Section 8 knows that, because I don't want the liability of having to repair something, a $600 fridge. I don't want that.
Right, sure.
And the air conditioning too. And I don't know the extra dollar amount, but sometimes depending on the house, I just say, hey, look I go, it has air. I go, I'm not responsible for it. So if it goes out, it goes out. And it's like, I tell Section 8 that too, because they, you're entitled to heat, but you're not entitled to air.
Right.
So,
sure.
And I tell them that. And that works out pretty well. But it's like, if they're a good tenant, they pay on time, the place is clean, you bet I'm going to go there and fix their air conditioning for them right away.
Sure. Right. You want to keep them happy.
Yeah.
So I think you're onto something too. With this is something I never even thought about, but adding in the appliances as an option to the lease and having them pay additional for those appliances, because what's going to happen if they're paying for them, they're going to take better care of them, and they're going to ultimately have that responsibility over those appliances, as opposed to, they rent out a place and it's just got the full complement of appliances where they're like, well, whatever, if it breaks, I just call the landlord, and I know I've experienced that myself when, I've had to replace appliances that are only a couple years old, and I'm like, what the heck happened here? When I open up the stove and find it covered in crusty old food. So yeah, that might be a good idea for an investor getting into this type of the business, because, why not? I mean, you're not required to provide them, so you add them in there. Charge them for it.
So, and like I said, you get in that gray area if you're trying to bump up your dollar amount.
Sure.
With Section 8, it's not worth it.
Right, not with Section 8 then. Yes. Makes sense.
So, but, so like I said, try not to include everything, because then your liability goes way up.
Right.
And then another thing it was funny when I was listening to your podcast the other day, I got a call from some lady. It was a referral, a section, I had one tenant. She's awesome. Still the honeymoon stage. But he referred her to me, and she's like, yeah, I got Section 8. I'm like, well, the only thing I got coming up is a pretty big 5-6 bedroom house. She goes, oh, wow. My voucher will cover up to, $1,400. I'm like, yeah, I'm asking like $1,500 is the base price. I go, well, and this is my first question I always ask everybody. I go, well, why are you moving? Because I found out, well, first of all, the first question is, oh, you're calling about my house in South Village? Oh, do you live out there now? Because if they live out there now, that's like, that gives them brownie points with me, because they know the area, they know what they're getting into. They're not like coming from, somewhere by you and then coming out to South Village. Like, damn,
sure.
This place is out in the middle of nowhere. I don't like this.
Right.
So they automatically brownie points with me, and then so I started. And then my next question is, oh, why are you moving? Oh, my landlord, he don't want to fix nothing. I go, oh, I hate guys like that. So then you get, you're on their side, and they start telling you about all this stuff, and then I'm like, well, are you still paying the rent? She goes, nope. She goes, Section 8 told me not to. Then he took me to court. Now we just decided that it's best that I just leave. I go, well, you might get your voucher taken away. She goes, yeah, we're trying to avoid that. All right, well, did you pay him? No, I'm just going to move out. Okay. Well, she's like, I still have my voucher now, though. I go, okay, well, what about in a couple months when you move in my place and then you still owe him money?
Right.
But, yeah, we're trying not to have that issue, but you got to pay him. So it's like, she does that to him or whatever, for whatever reason. He might be a slumlord. I don't know. And I tell people, I'll go to your house, and then they'll say, well, you don't want to see nothing here because you don't take care of anything. I'm like, yeah, that's great. I always love seeing people working what they don't do. So.
Right. Okay.
But, yeah, so it was just funny. And then she was telling me about her voucher and everything, like right as I was taking all my notes on your podcast. But, here's another good one. And as I was talking to her, she's like, yeah, I'm going to be getting a 4-bedroom voucher soon because my daughter just had a baby.
Right.
And now that's another gray area because I've been in situations before where they're supposed to get their voucher bumped up and they don't. And you're stuck with the dollar, the whatever voucher they have.
Sure.
And there's some type of matrix also where no caseworker will give you the straight answer as if their family multiplies how long the baby has to live with the mom in the bedroom for, and I think it's 2 years. And then how many kids can share? Well, there's 2 kids in a room. They used to have it where same sex couldn't share a room. So I don't know. And there's so many different little variables in there that I don't know. So if someone tells you their voucher is going to increase, I would be kind of wary about that.
Sure.
So I wouldn't do that.
Well, again, that goes back to that whole the ambiguity that goes along with even just the startup process when you're renting to a tenant. You really don't know what you're getting into on the financial side until you've got something documented in writing from the caseworker. And if the tenant's telling you one thing and that their situation is going to change, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden that, is going to accommodate a financial downfall and create a windfall for you for rent, whether it's an additional child's been born or whatever. I mean, it's every situation is specifically examined on the Section 8 side. So I agree with you, though. I hear the same thing, and I deal with the same type of challenges, and you just got to go with your standard processing and say, well, you can't predict the future and say, well, you're going to be able to afford this place in 2 months, or we're going to be able to increase the rent or whatever. I mean, that's not how it's going to work with Section 8.
Yeah, and I also had it where there's like 2 kids per room, and then I had a tenant that moved into one of my places. She had 2 boys, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to get a 3-bedroom voucher." I'm like, "Yeah, right." And then she did. I was like, "Holy cow!"
Well, again, it might be the case. The caseworker hearing the case of the tenant.
It's a gray area. So I think it depends on the caseworker if they feel sorry for him or whatever. And it's unfortunate that's the gray area. It's not black and white, like you can or you can't. This is the rules, and it's not out there. So
exactly,
I would say that. So that's my thought.
And one of the recommendations that I've heard, and I did mention it in the podcast number 18 where I talked about Section 8, was that that book, the Section 8 Bible. I don't think there's a need for that if you listen to your podcast. Well, thank you. But one of the recommendations I think that came from that book was, before you rent Section 8, contact the housing authority and actually ask them for a copy of their policies, rules, regulations, whatever, so you can up front better understand what that potential, what those potential gray areas and challenges can be, so you can try to eliminate them, to your benefit. Not that you're trying to cheat anybody out of anything, but you want to have a full understanding of what you're getting into before you've, like you said, you're trying to rent a place for $1,300 a month. The next thing you know, you're getting a Section 8 payment of $925, and that's it. And then you're stuck in a 1-year lease. And that's the type of stuff that can happen. So, to all the listeners out there who are considering or currently renting Section 8, and by the way, if there's anybody who has another opinion on this, I'd love to hear it. What your experience have been like besides myself and
prove us wrong.
Eddie's right. No, yeah, you're right. I mean, have that information ready up front so you're prepared for the potential challenge you might face. But that does not mean that it's still not a good situation. That is a lot of the reasons why a lot of landlords do say, though, that they don't want to work with Section 8 is for that very reason. It's the lack of, that mutual understanding between the agency and the landlord, I think. But I mean, I've had good luck. I've had good and bad luck with Section 8, so it can go either way. But like you said, I mean, a lot of it just comes down to the tenant. So
please take a moment to hear from our featured sponsors.
While we're on this quick break from the podcast with Eddie Mccracken on Section 8, I just want to take a minute to talk about this new lending opportunity I have for the other investors out there that are listening to this podcast, or perhaps are part of the networking group or the networking groups that we're associated with here at Tenants Group. I have every sponsor or vendor that I work with or allowed to be a part of my groups or be on the podcast, I've had some type of experience with, meaning I typically vet them out on my own before I allow them to, advertise or be a part of anything that I'm doing, because I don't want to be marketing for a company or a vendor that isn't going to perform the way they say they do. A great example is like Pathway Financial or Zach Karp. Pathway Financial is the line of credit business for investors where you can obtain lines of credit to buy properties or do whatever you want with the money. And Zach Karp from Success Mortgage Partners, again, guys that I've actually worked with, closed deals with. I've seen how they operate, and I'm happy to call them a partner in our sponsorships. That said, I've got another opportunity to work with this vendor now I brought up earlier. Just to give you a quick analyzation of it, very easy application process, asset-based financing. So they're looking at the property and the project itself, not necessarily the borrower, which they even allow for bankruptcies and previous foreclosures. There is a little bit of a time limit on there. I believe you can't have one in the last 2 years. I'd have to verify that if that's one of your situations. But if you're interested in learning more about it, they just quoted me a 90% loan. So 10% down payment on a property I have a contract on for a 12-month term at 7.5%. So this is typically what you're going to see for a fix and flip type loan where you can get construction draws. They'll also pay for the rehab costs through part of the loan, up to 3 draws for that particular project. So far, I'm extremely impressed with what they're offering and the ease of their systems and the loans that they're offering. So if you have any more questions or this is a possible fit for expanding your business in 2017, please get a hold of me, Jay Mueller at TannisGroupLLC.com as soon as you can, and I'd be happy to connect you with the right people in order to take advantage of this loan or those types of loans. And that said, if you are a potential sponsor for our networking group, we are looking for physical sponsors to be present at our meetings that help pay for the cost of the room and the food that is provided to our guests. No guest pays any fees to get in the door. As a matter of fact, now we're collecting canned goods and food to be donated to a local food pantry, which is actually the Fish Food Pantry out here in the Elgin area of Illinois. I'm dropping off those goods myself on a regular basis. If you are interested in sponsoring, we've got a very vibrant group of aspiring and experienced investors, typically having about 75 attendees per meeting. And all these people are either in the business or looking to grow their business. So if you think you can help one of our investors or all of them grow their business in 2017, please contact me to be a sponsor of our meetup group. And that's the same email address. It's jmueller at TannisGroupLLC.com. J, M as in Mary, UELLER at TANISGroupLLC.com. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Let's bring Eddie back.
Thank you for considering our featured sponsors.
Why don't we just kind of start on some of the other points you wanted to hit on before we wrap this thing up?
Be careful of tenants with the high dollar amounts, meaning, rent's $1,000 a month, tenant pays $800 a month, Section 8 pays $200 a month. And most Section 8 tenants are late all the time. $800 is a big chunk of change to be out of. And then plus they have that extra barrier of protection of having to go through whatever channels or systems of caseworkers to get through to whoever you need to notify them if you're having problems. And
right.
if they stop paying a couple months, that's gonna hurt your pockets.
Absolutely.
So
no, great point. There are Section 8 tenants out there that are only getting a supplement of a couple $100 where you could be renting a place for $1,200 a month and they're only getting $300 or $400 and they've got to make up that balance as part of their benefit agreement. And yeah, that again, had experience in that neck of the woods. It is extremely difficult to keep them consistently paying rent on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Can be, yes.
Yeah, think about that. What else did I have for you? I think my flow got ruined.
That's all right. That's all right, man. It was good. I mean, we covered a lot of topics.
Here's a good one for you. Your lease that you brought up, about a year lease, tenants tied down to a year lease. That is correct.
Right.
I was told, but once again, this is a gray area. I think that I was told that if you like my leases, they auto renew 60 days before the due date. So if they don't tell me they're moving, you're staying for another year, dude. Sorry.
But how do you mitigate that with Section 8 then? Because don't they just convert them to a month to month, or what do you do exactly in order to maintain that annual lease? Unless
they say there's a problem with it. I emailed them my lease, a blank copy. They approve it. Sorry, you didn't let me know you're moving out 60 days notice. You didn't give me 60 days notice. Sorry.
So then you're able to you email the caseworker a copy of the blank lease, and then they approve it and say, okay, it auto renews to another year automatically?
Well, no, they don't say it then, but it's part of the whole accepting process. You have to fax or email them a copy of your lease before they approve. So it was in the lease. I don't know what you want me to do. Do you want me to read you the entire thing? You read it. You were supposed to.
Right. Well, that might be one. That's a nice takeaway, actually, where assuming the tenant actually wants to be there, because I'm sure if they really don't want to be there, they'll find a way to get out of that lease, good or bad. But
right. Then you respond. You terminated your lease, so you owe me 2 months. Not that you'll pay it, but
right. Right. But it does create that additional level of security on the landlord side where you can always have an annual lease, as opposed to with Section 8's normal program is it just auto converts to a 30-day notice,
correct,
month to month.
Correct. If there was no type of agreement reached after that. But my agreement was reached before that because it's in my lease.
Yeah, because they got to give you 60 days notice, and that makes a lot of sense. And again, for the listeners who haven't dealt with Section 8, when they do convert to month after a year, you can re-sign an additional annual lease. The tenant and you just have to re-sign a lease, and the caseworker, again, has to approve it. But it's not like it eliminates an annual lease at that point. It just automatically converts to a month-to-month, which is how any typical annual lease would work, unless you've got that language built in like Eddie has, which I think is a great idea. Good point.
And then let's jump to this one, because I don't know my time frame. This is one of the best ones. If you purchase like a house from somebody that had a Section 8 tenant for a long time, and that landlord never asked for an increase in 10 years, and then you buy the property thinking that you're going to get market rent, there's a special time frame where you can only ask for increases in rent. And I don't know the exact answer on that. And just the kicker, that the most that they can increase the rent, no matter how much they're paying, is 10%. So if you buy a house from somebody that hasn't, asked for rent, the tenant's been there for 20 years. So I ran into a situation like this. Tenant's been there for 20 years. Landlord's making $600 a month. The rent should be $900 a month. So when I purchase the property, sweet, I'll just buy it, ask for an increase, boom, I'm cash flowing crazy now. Nope. The most they'll give me is 10% increase.
Really?
So
I did not know that.
And that's in that special window.
Okay. What do you mean by special window?
Meaning like 2 months out of the year, like before their annual renewal is or something.
Right.
Like the annual checkup on the case file.
Right. Oh, I see. So you'd have to, number one, know when that window is so you can raise the rent if you planned on it. And if you do plan on raising it, it can only be up to 10% of your current rent. Wow, that's a great piece of information. I did not know that, but now I'm glad that I do. Good point.
Yeah, so when you get excited and buy that property and then find out you're only getting $60 more per month and you thought you were going to get $300.
Right.
I kicking the balls.
Right, yes. Yeah, that sucks. It does. It can suck. But again, due diligence on the front end, buyer beware, Section 8, maybe get the rule book, contact the caseworker. I mean, there's lots of ways to try to become more knowledgeable of how the situation works before somebody goes crying later on 6 months after they buy a house with a Section 8 tenant. I mean, that's all stuff that could be figured out in advance. So
yeah, and don't take word on that, though. So just go verify that. And
exactly.
Prove me wrong if I'm
right.
That was one of the meetings I went to where the head honcho was running her mouth telling us how awesome the program is, and then someone asked that. And then I was like, oh, okay.
Cool.
So
awesome.
Yeah, so I think that was the good one that I wanted to bring up. So
great point. What book are you currently listening to right now, Eddie? I know you want to talk about this a little bit.
Oh, man, I'm listening to Grant Cardone's book, The Obsessed one, and I listened to it like a year ago.
Right.
And it was cool, but it just means, it's a totally different meaning to me now, and I'm all pumped up now trying to, my whole thing is making time. That's my number one goal when I walk in my office now, where I'm trying to, do the VA stuff, is create time. I need time. So
sure.
That's what I'm doing now, and that's what he preaches.
It's the most valuable piece of anyone's life, in my opinion. It ain't about money, because you can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. I agree with that. Great. So Grant Cardone's, it's Be Obsessed or Be Average, right? Is that the name of the book?
Yeah.
I did listen to chapter 6, as you told me to. Awesome chapter. Yeah. A lot of great points about how everyone else has a tendency to kind of keep you down in the place that they think you should be in, as opposed to you really focusing and excelling to the type of level that you could be at. And I'm looking forward to actually starting from the beginning now and listening to the entire book on Audible.
Yeah, keep going to chapter 7. Chapter 7 gets hot and heavy, man. So
yeah. You know what the great thing about that book is, though? I don't know if any of the listeners have actually seen Grant Cardone's videos or have heard any of his podcasts or broadcasts. Or he's a huge marketer, a ton of marketing. He's all over the place in the real estate space as well as business. And I think my favorite part about that book so far is the fact that he's actually reading it, and knowing him or seeing him on videos or webinars and things like that. I mean, this is exactly him just basically telling you, coaching you, advising you on how to be a better businessman, investor, family man, etc. It's awesome. I love that fact about it, that it's him actually reading the book. You could hear the emotion in his voice.
I listen it through that Audible, and I have it I usually listen to most of my books at double the speed. I can only listen to his at 1.5, and I'm I still think I'm on some type of drug when I'm whoa. It's intense.
That's awesome.
Him at 1.5.
That's awesome.
So,
cool.
yeah.
Well, why don't we talk about how people can get a hold of you if they're interested or have more questions about how Section 8 works or more interested in how your business works? If you want to give them maybe your email address.
Just give me an email at Eddie, EDDYMC33 at Yahoo, or you can just send me a text. That's the best way too. 708-476-9800.
Okay, so that's
bounce ideas off each other.
Eddie, EDDYMC33 at yahoo.com, right?
Yep.
And then your phone number, which you just gave out, which is awesome. All right, I appreciate you taking the time on your busy investing workday to take a few minutes out for me. And I know we'll be talking soon, but until then, have a good rest of the week.
Hey, you too, man. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series Radio Show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investorempowermentchicago.com or tennisgrouprealty.com.